Welcome to Season 4 of the Charity Matters podcast. I'm Heidi Johnson, lifelong helper, nonprofit founder, and your host. I've been interviewing the helpers for a decade with my blog, and I'm so excited to now be sharing these inspiring conversations on our podcast. Join me as we learn the challenges and stories of innovators, entrepreneurs, and modern-day heroes who set out to solve the problems of humanity. Have you ever been surfing? Do you love the sound of the ocean? Today's guest, Nancy Miller, shares with us her remarkable journey from surf mom to working with Elton John, Jean-Michel Cousteau, and her incredible work with the Jimmy Miller Foundation. You won't want to miss this. We are so excited to have Nancy Miller join us today, the co-founder of the Jimmy Miller Foundation, and we cannot wait to hear her journey in philanthropy and all the wonderful work they're doing with their organization. So welcome, Nancy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me on this very hot, sunny day.
It is a very hot, sunny day, and I'm so happy that we're having this conversation. Two California girls, one at the beach and one at the valley. And Nancy's at the beach, and I am in the very hot valley for everyone who's listening across the country and everywhere else. But before we get started, tell me a little bit about what the Jimmy Miller Foundation does.
The Jimmy Miller Foundation uses surfing and a form of adaptive surfing that we created to help those with mental and physical disabilities feel the healing power of the ocean, and knowing that what we know about how people react to being in the ocean, whether it's the chemistry of their bodies or their joy and their happiness, their complete giddiness of changing their whole mental well-being when they go to the beach. So that's the basis of the Jimmy Miller Foundation, teaching people to surf using an adaptive form of surfing and combining it with group therapy and letting the healing begin for youth and adults all over the country.
I love that. I love that. So I always say people don't wake up and just decide to start a nonprofit. And I actually, of course, did a little bit of homework. And so I know a little bit about your background prior to this work. But before you tell the story of how you started it, share with us a little bit about kind of your resume. I mean, you have a really incredible philanthropic nonprofit background. I mean, wow, Nancy, like, you were born for this. So share a little bit about what you've done prior to the Jimmy Miller Foundation.
Well, prior to Jimmy Miller Foundation, I was a wife, a mom, a student, and my jobs have been everything to prepare me for what I'm doing now. I never thought that what I did in the past would so well prepare me for what I'm doing now. And I think what you're talking about is I worked with the Elton John AIDS Foundation when it very first got going. So we're talking 1994. And I was lucky enough to be part of an incredible staff there. And I did special projects for the Elton John AIDS Foundation, which is a foundation that deals with helping those obviously with HIV and AIDS. And my job was special projects, so I got to do a little bit of everything. So I actually got to co-produce some of the big events that Elton John AIDS Foundation did to raise funds back in the early days.
Like his Oscar party and all those fun things.
Did. I co-produced the one of the very first, it was actually the second Oscar party the Elton John AIDS Foundation did. And it was relatively small back in those days, this 1995. And it was 150 people that Elton had hand chosen, his musician friends. And it was an Oscar watching party where he invited people, and they obviously had to pay for their tables to come. And we watched the awards. And then after the awards, all the winners came to the party and celebrated together. So that was pretty heady stuff. And it was very, very much fun. And I learned so much about how to run a nonprofit. Elton John was a great boss. And he was very hands-on, and he knew how much money we were making and what the overhead was. And
That's awesome.
it was a wonderful learning experience for me do so many things. I was lucky enough to travel with him to other cities and produce events around the country. We did one in Neiman Marcus in Atlanta, where he had a home, and we called it, it was Elton's Closet, and we sold his clothes there. People
Oh
came
my
from all over the
gosh.
world, and it was a giant fundraiser. And we did a smash hits tennis tournament with, Chrissy Everett and Martina and Pete Sampras. So it was a wonderful job, and I worked with great people. And I so respect Elton for how he started his foundation, because unlike a lot of other celebrities, he really did his homework, and he said, this is what I am. I'm a musician. I don't know about raising funds and the legal ways to do them, and the best people and the best doctors. So he went after the best people and had them on his team. And it was really fantastic to see how it grew from that first Oscar party. I think there were five of us in the office, and it was like, oh, let's put on a play, and we did it,
Well,
and to have seen the success has been unbelievable.
well, and I think about, he obviously chose the best people, and he chose you, Nancy, and there's a reason for that. And I do think that there is a reason when you think about the path that we go on to do this work. It's often precarious. It often has twists and turns, and some pretty big roadblocks that happen. But the result is usually something pretty fantastic. I've interviewed hundreds of nonprofit founders, and almost I would say 80% of the people I've interviewed have had some sort of loss or some sort of something that affected them personally. And out of it, they decided to use that pain as fuel for good. And then there's other people, and like Elton John, a lot of people had like maybe near misses or close friends, people they were close to, that something happened that they wanted to use that and make something good from something out of that. And so I think I just have, to me, people who start nonprofits and foundations are angels on earth, and I just have such admiration. So I love that you had an angel mentor, and even
I
one that,
also had another one, though. I have to mention Jean-Michel
yes,
Cousteau, because that was a chance of a lifetime. My family, we're all divers, and we were. My husband was on a board with Jean-Michel Cousteau, and I had just recently left the Elton John AIDS Foundation. I said, I need a break. I can't travel over the world. I'm tired of producing events. But I met this amazing man with the background, and obviously everybody knows his father, Jacques Cousteau, and the Cousteau
Jacques Cousteau,
Society.
right?
And he had started his own foundation called the Ocean Future Society. And after spending a week with him for other reasons, through my husband's nonprofit that he was with, Jean-Michel said, I need someone to produce a big event. So to
Here
be
you go
able
again.
to work with a person that I admired, who'd done so much in our world, for our environment, for our coral reefs, for our very planet that we live in, it was such a joy to work with Ocean Futures and Jean-Michel and all the people I met that were they were absolutely consumed with making the world, and especially our water world, safer and better for humans. And one of the things that I loved best about Jean-Michel is that he was so non-proprietary, and he wanted all the nonprofits in the ocean world to join together. And they weren't in competition to raise funds or see who has the biggest event, but they were there to help the world. And by helping the
Right.
world, the way they could help the world was by joining forces. So to me, that was a huge lesson in collaboration on a global scale that I was able to absorb. So I just feel so lucky to have worked with these such exceptional people. They've really changed. I mean, Elton with the music and Jean-Michel with the environment have changed our world. So
Oh,
it's
completely.
amazing.
Completely. And I think that and even to coming back to the Jerry Miller Foundation, as you think about the stepping stones of Elton John teaching you all of these things with events, and then all the ocean work that you were doing with Jean-Michel and the Cousteau, and then starting your own foundation. So share with us a little bit about about Jimmy and about how you started your foundation?
Well, we were normal. We thought we were a pretty normal Manhattan Beach family, and my kids grew up. We raised them in Manhattan Beach, California, and we were a typical beach family. Our activities were all centered around going to the beach. Jimmy and Jeff were 5 years apart, so in a lot of ways, it was almost like having two only children early on because one went off to kindergarten, then I had a new baby, but we were, for all intents and purposes, a regular family doing, off to high school and junior high school. Jimmy fell in love with surfing when he was 7. And
Wow.
he as he wrote about later in one of his many articles that he wrote, he was on his boogie board and he actually got in the tube, in the curl of the
Mhm.
boogie board, and he heard this sound that was magical. And even then he knew from that age on that that's what he wanted to be, in that water space. And he that's how he lived his life. So by the time he was 10, he was surfing in contests, and all of his friends surfed. And so our life kind of was around the water, around surfing. My husband and I took them all over the world when we could. Uh, Surfing, I'd like to, we went to Spain and I hardly saw any monuments, but I know every from
Every good
Madrid down
beach.
to Portugal.
Right.
But that was, we went scuba diving adventures. So we were a very water oriented family. And Jimmy was a scholar athlete, and did great. Got into Berkeley and did great in Berkeley. Started the first surf club at Cal ever.
I love that.
Just sort of things that he would do. And he had a great college experience. And we were in our very, very close family. So we got to share everything together. He started he had a travel bug big time. When he was 16, a group of he and his friends went to Fiji. We can't, and as moms now, looking back at it now, without internet, without anything, we let our 16-year-old boys go to Fiji on a trip that they had planned themselves.
Wow.
But
Wow.
Jimmy organized that trip, and they got there right after a coup. And but they had the time of their life, came back, and we think about it now. We went, what were we thinking? But it seemed like a good thing to do.
It was a different world. It was a different time.
It was a different time. So that's the sort of person that Jimmy was, organizing things for his friends, thinking up new adventures and traveling. So he, at 18, after high school, before he went to Cal, passed the Los Angeles County lifeguard test. So he became a Los Angeles lifeguard, which was to ultimately, be part of a life-changing occupation for him. So all through college, he was a lifeguard in the summer in Manhattan Beach in the South Bay. And he loved especially a program called the Junior Guards, which is where young children starting at 8 or 9 learn ocean skills, lifeguard skills, swimming, paddling, running, and all the things that lifeguards have to do. And it's one of the most popular programs up and down the coast. And for us as parents, it ensured our kids would be ocean safe by the time we let them go to the ocean by themselves.
Absolutely.
It was kind of a rule. I mean,
it's part of the culture of Southern California. I mean, so many kids do junior guards. My kids are Pasadena. I used to drive them to Manhattan Beach when they were little for surf camp, because I grew up at the beach, and my husband's a lake person. I was like, you are not going to grow up in Southern California and not know how to be in the ocean. This is just not, that's just not. So even as inland moms, come out to the coast for surf lessons for our kids, because you need to know how to be safe on the beach.
Well, I hope you took them to Camp Surf, because that was Jimmy's camp. That he
I think I did. I want to say it was at 28th Street. I can't remember, but I want to say it was before the pier.
Right, like they were on 42nd Street. So
okay, I think that is where my kids went. My boys are 27, 25, and 21.
That would be the
it was blue. It was blue with yellow. Was it blue with yellow? Yeah. Yes, that's where they went. They went to Camp Surf.
That's pretty amazing. That was one of his dreams. that after he graduated, he started his company, which is called Pure Surfing Experience. When he started it, he wanted kids to not feel that surfing had to be competitive. He wanted it to be a family, laid back thing where it's something he loved, that made you feel good, that made everyone around you, something that you could share. And so he called his company Pure Surfing Experience because that's what he wanted for them. However, at that time, 25 years ago, getting close to 30 years when he started it, one of his friends, who was a computer guru, said, "That's too many words for a URL." He said, "I think you should call your company Camp Surf, and while you're at it, you might want to get some other URLs." So Jimmy got Camp Surf, Camp Yoga, Camp Skate, and Camp Volley, and to this day, that's what they have been able to do, those camps. Jimmy
Wow.
actually created a computer program for his surf company. Learned to code, figured it out himself, and was really the first computerized surf company. Certainly in California. And he was a pretty smart guy.
Yeah.
And so he had this company. He was running his company. He did meet and marry a young model, and unfortunately, they separated after about 5 years. And in this time, Jimmy had grown his company, had traveled all over the world. He was teaching lessons, and he was writing newspaper articles, and doing great. And shortly before his divorce, his separation, he tore his labrum in his shoulder, and was going through this very difficult separation. And where he had been the joy of everyone's life and a golden light in the world, all of a sudden he became very anxious and concerned. And there's wasn't any prior evidence of any mental illness in our family, and certainly not in our immediate family. At that time, we didn't know. And with this injury, he couldn't go in the water. And when he wasn't able to go in the water, it totally changed his body chemistry and his brain chemistry.
Wow.
And it threw him into a real tailspin. And he, in May of 2004, he had a psychotic break. And no one really knew what to do, as parents and
Right.
his brother, his close friends, because there was so little talk about mental illness, what happens, severe depression. So we
And
searched.
there's still so few resources. Even, I
There,
mean, people talk about it, but the resources are so limited compared to the scope of the problem.
exactly.
Yeah.
So we reached out to everyone we possibly could and got him, the beginning of some help. And he was hospitalized briefly, and came out of the hospital. And he was not, our Jimmy. He was heavily medicated, and we were hoping for the best, but they were never able to stabilize him on medication. So he tried his best to integrate himself back into the community and back into his company and his surfing passion. But because of what was going on in his interior mind, he was afraid to take people surfing. He was concerned about ocean safety. He had incredible paranoia.
I'm so
And
sorry.
our life was a whirlwind of trying to make sure that Jimmy was okay, that his company that had committed to the city of Manhattan Beach to run their whole summer surf program was running. His brother Jeff took over and brought in all of Jimmy's friends that were available to help run the camp. And but Jimmy was so concerned, and that was, so much from the mental illness
Right.
speaking. And in August, on August 7th, 2004, he had spent the night at our house. We had tried to have him stay at our house on as often as possible, but he had his own apartment and he had friends visiting from all over the world. And he was a 35-year-old man.
Right.
And, there was only so much we could do.
Right.
And on August 7th, we had seen him in the morning, and we were going to see him for dinner. And that night he took his life, and changed all of our lives and those of everyone who loved him, and the surf community and the lifeguard community. And I will say the community of Manhattan Beach all came together, along with friends all over the world, in disbelief that Jimmy had this undiagnosed mental illness.
Right.
And how quickly things changed from May to August, not even 6 months. So
it's unbelievable. Life, hands us these jolts, these shocks. I kind of say sometimes people, maybe the Southern California thing, but I think life comes in earthquakes. I don't think it comes in tremors. I think it comes in earthquakes. And I think that the losses like that we experience are earthquakes that shatter us. I mean, they take us down, but out of them comes these mountains and this rebirth, because you cannot have loss without growth. You cannot have a fire without a new forest, and you cannot have an earthquake without new buildings, and you cannot have death without rebirth. I mean, it's these conversations are so hard sometimes, but they're so real and they're so important, because very few of us get out of here without loss. And it's what you do with it, and it is a process to dig out, and a process that you carry with you always when you have a love that deep. And a child is a whole other level. But then to take something as tragic as that and to make something so beautiful, a legacy that is still thriving, is really what is so inspiring and beautiful, Nancy. I mean, it's such a tribute to Jimmy, and such a tribute to your love as a mother, and to your family, and to your community, that his name lives on every day with all of those that you serve in his memory. I mean, it's just the most beautiful gift you could ever give anybody, is what you've done.
Thank you. They say it takes a village. It really does. And after he died, when we were all still in shock, everybody, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Because you have to do something. You feel like you have to do something. And we did know that, we did have to do something, and to be able to have this water community that we are so connected with. We thought, well, we'll do something for the junior guards. We'll do something, something like
right.
that.
And how soon was it that this all came together? The foundation.
It was incredibly soon. I mean, I think we started the process in less than 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And because I had been, and so many, and my husband, and so many of the people that we surrounded ourselves with, friends and families, had all been part of starting foundations, and knew how to do it.
Right.
And because I couldn't do anything, all I could do was spin, basically, for 5 years. But when I wasn't spinning, I could focus enough to know, what needed to be done and how to be done. But if you ask me for specifics, I can't tell you a whole lot of
That's
those.
okay. Doesn't matter.
But because of that, we were able to get a 501c3 quickly. People know how to do it. I mean, so many people that I talk to don't even know what that is. Obviously, I want to start a foundation. What do I do? And counseling people.
It's a process.
we had
Right.
such a head start, and
Absolutely.
we're able to, pull this idea. And the idea came from when we were thinking about what we wanted to do in his name. One of the LA County lifeguard who he had mentored, actually, he had actually taught her to surf because he thought every lifeguard should know how to surf. And not all of them did, and most
Right.
of them do now. But her name was Carly Rogers, and she was working on her master's in occupational therapy. And she was a surfer, and she was working with autistic children. And she came up with this concept she called ocean therapy. And
Oh,
what she
wow.
believed was that you could help children, and that applies, to our later work, achieve self-efficacy. You could, obviously they feel better when they're in the water, but the self-efficacy and the self-confidence could raise in measurable levels. Because remember, she was right. This is a thesis, and
Right.
she was able to show, before and after. If I can stand up on a surfboard, I can probably solve that math program, or I can,
Right.
sit down and figure out a way to communicate with someone a little bit better because I have efficacy, I have agency
Right.
over
Right.
myself.
Right.
And so that was the thesis of her, that was the basis of her thesis. And she goes, I think you should find some kids and test my thesis. And I know it works. And I know we can help so many people. And from
Wow.
that, she talked to Jeff, my other son, and who she had known through lifeguards, and they'd gone to high
Right.
school together, not in the same high school, but different high schools. And by then we had formed our board. So now we're a year down the road. And one of the board members' daughters knew someone at a nonprofit called, at that time, Holly Grove, which was in Hollywood.
Right.
And
Wasn't
they,
Marilyn Monroe at Holly Grove?
yes, Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe was actually
Yes.
at Holly Grove,
Yes.
and for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So it had a long, long legacy, and it also at that time was an orphanage, a living
Right.
home, and has since changed, but most of them have. But they knew somebody there, and they went and presented their program as academically and professionally as they could. And the executive director turns out to have been a surfer from Manhattan Beach.
Oh,
And
wow.
then she went, how soon can we come? And how many kids
Oh,
can we bring?
oh, that's
And
so great.
literally, the following summer in 2005, we started our first, and we called it ocean therapy, and it was, a full days, a half a day's program that had been carefully computed through her master's work, and
Right.
very, very closely studied and evaluated. And she knew that the combination of guided surfing, adaptive surfing, and talking about it, talk therapy. Just,
Right.
how's it feel? What does it feel like to be on that board? The descriptive words and all the feelings that came from, being around the water, let alone being on a
Right.
surfboard, and
Right.
whether you're riding on your tummy, your knees, or whatever, how it changed kids' affect, and she knew that.
Absolutely.
So we took 6 kids that first time at Holly Grove, and I think we probably had 400 volunteers, and everyone wanted.
Who wouldn't want to come to Manhattan Beach and surf? I mean, come
Right,
on.
exactly.
So what kind of challenges did you have in the beginning? I mean, obviously you're figuring this out. It is kind of crazy when you start. And having started a nonprofit and having had a tragedy myself, losing my mom suddenly in a car accident, when we started, they're not coincidences, but all these things kind of align that just get you on the path. Like it wasn't a coincidence that she was a surfer from Manhattan Beach. I mean, these things just keep happening, and so many of them happen, you can't explain it. It becomes a little bit crazy. And in my experience, and a lot of people that I've spoken to, you get so many and you just keep going, going, going. These doors just keep opening. But then it gets a little bumpy because then the stuff starts getting real, and the experience, those little magical moments, we still have them, but they're not as strong as they are in the beginning. There's
Mhm.
challenges in this work. So what were some of the challenges that you guys ran into as you
Well,
were
well, the
getting going?
challenge is for us. was, the first summer went great because we had four or six sessions and,
Right.
a few kids. The challenges began the following year when we began to grow the program. And, we wanted to work with, maybe four agencies, I think children's
Right.
agencies. And, to be able to, number one, have their development directors actually get on board, which was, we were lucky with Mary, we were lucky with
Right.
Holly Grove, but it was a little bit a little bit of a sell, but not so much. For us, the challenges became finding enough. It's an all volunteer organization. Finding enough
Right.
volunteers. Those first 5 or 6 years, we really did not have that problem, but
Right.
over the years, certainly volunteers, funding for equipment, uh,
Right.
being able to make sure that there was Carly was an occupational therapist, and part of the program that differentiates it from any other program. It's not just about surfing. It's about that talk therapy. It's about having a therapist on site at every single session.
Right.
And so as we grew, uh, and the numbers changed, it was a matter of working overtime to find the qualified people to actually give the surf lessons. And we needed lunches, we needed
Yeah.
food, we needed
Right.
snacks, we needed a photographer to take pictures. So as the program grew, we needed transportations. We had to get the boards from here to there. So just it keeps growing. And what we just had the most, for us, one of the more remarkable sessions in our 17 years, just 2 weeks ago, with the Friendship Foundation, which works with developmentally delayed and young adults, special needs adults, ages basically 18 to 35, who have kind of
Right.
aged out of their children's, their schooling programs. And was started by uh, Rabbi Yossi Mintz as a way of getting children with these developmental problems, these young people, mentored up with teenagers from local high schools. And
Excuse me.
whether they had a movie night or whether they did bingo or something like that,
Right.
it was normalizing their lives, whether they were on the spectrum or
Right.
autistic or Down
Peer-to-peer
syndrome.
mentorship is
the whole
everything.
the, the peer mentorship, and their nonprofit has grown along with ours over the years, based in Manhattan Beach. And we had always wanted to do something with them, and finally they have a new executive director who we knew from other areas of our work. And I called her and I said, "Hey, we've got to get together. We've got to get your kids surfing." And she goes,
Right.
"Oh my gosh, I was just going to reach out." And they were just getting ready to want to get these kids surfing. So 2 weeks ago, we took 12 of the special needs young adults
Oh,
surfing. And I am telling you, it reminded us of why we started it. It was such a special session. The joy that these kids could
oh,
articulate, their ability, to follow instructions and get up on the board. And of the 12 of them, I mean, 6 of them were standing up within a half an hour.
wow.
I mean, it was so joyful,
That's
and yet it just seemed like the next step that we should be taking with a new population. It
right.
was it was something
Excuse
unexpected,
me.
and we were a little concerned because we didn't know the
Right.
actual mental problems and behavioral. But they gave us a lovely little warm up and a little bit about
Right.
kids, and they said,
Kids
"This
are
is it.
kids. Right.
It's all just about having fun."
It's
So
all the
having that new population, added to our group, along with the other one Heidi, that I'm so excited about, is that during COVID, we all knew that our healthcare workers were suffering,
right.
and especially the people on the front lines of COVID,
Absolutely.
whether they are working in palliative care or whatever. And one of the local hospitals contacted us at the end of 21 and said, "My people are really suffering. And I've read about you in the medical journal. Do you
Right.
think that you could help us with ocean therapy?" And we went, you betcha. This is Torrance Memorial
Oh,
Hospital. So
that's so
at the end of
great.
21, we took a group of their healthcare workers, doctors, social workers, just people who worked in the hospital, a group of, I think that group was 10 or 12, which is our optimum number. And
Right.
oh my goodness, it was so fabulous and so exciting to see this group, like every group, come in and going, it's a Saturday, it was kind of
But to
gloomy. And
give back to the
yeah,
givers and to give back to those that help, I mean, that keeps fueling that goodness. I mean,
yep,
that's a definite payday.
yep.
So what, I mean, this you've been on a miraculous journey from everything from Elton John to Jean-Michel Cousteau to this brilliant foundation. What life lessons have you learned in all this? Because I have to imagine there are more than a few.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, I think, as I said in the very beginning, it takes a village. You cannot do something, alone. It takes all those the people that are intertwined. Um, and you need to be able to reach out and ask for help.
Right.
It doesn't just happen to you.
Right.
I'm not very good for asking, you know,
Most of us aren't. Most of us aren't. Some
but
of us become professional at it when we run nonprofits. We have no
I
choice.
will never be comfortable. Although, my good friends now, they look at me and they said, especially if we're doing an event or something like that, and they say, if they see me coming, just step out of the way, because, you'll end up, doing the event and donating something. But having faith in the process and
Right.
being able to have the most fabulous, surround yourself with people who understand and who know. I mean, we've gone from an occupational therapist to now we have a therapist that does, his specialty is family child counseling. And so we've been able to combine occupational therapy and traditional therapy,
Right.
psychological therapy, with group therapy. So surround yourself with the best people. We've gone from one therapist to now we have 7 or 8 that are, available to
Isn't
lead
that
our sessions. So to
so
be able to
incredible?
look at resources around you and be imaginative. I mean, we pulled the person that's now the head of our therapeutic program. I had no idea he was a psychologist. I only knew him because he played the guitar at at some of our events, and I happened to read an article about him, and he was a surfing psychologist. And we
There
were
you
looking
go.
for someone new. I called him and I went, "Hi." I didn't know you were a therapist. And there he went. And he's been with us.
Oh,
Souza, an amazing man who brought his own therapeutic recovery,
oh,
was part and
beautiful.
parcel of, this program. So
Beautiful. Well, so how do you think you've changed in all this, Nancy? Do you think you've changed in this journey since you started?
yeah, I mean, I really have. I mean, as I mentioned before, the first 5 years, as I said, I felt all I did was spin. I know I was there, and I know I was available to heal when we were at ocean therapy sessions, but I couldn't do it. It was just
Right.
too painful to talk about Jimmy, and for me, it was how he died and not how he lived. And
Right.
the big difference now is, I can talk about how he lived and what a difference his life has made. So I think in terms of, my biggest change, personally, is to have had that. So I couldn't have had this conversation with you. I just couldn't have.
Yeah.
It wouldn't
Right.
have worked.
Of
Uh,
course. Of
and
course.
and now I'm so happy to share his stories. And if I shed some tears while I'm talking, it is just, it's part of the story.
It is part
It's
of
a
the
part of a
story.
mother story, and this is a family story. This
This is
isn't
a
about
love
me.
story is what this is, Nancy. This is a true love
It's
story.
not. It's never been about me. It's always been about the family and the people that have supported us from the very beginning.
Well, and love never dies, as you and I both know, love never dies, and it obviously lives on in the Jimmy Miller Foundation with every life that Jimmy and you and your family and your staff and your team touch. that love goes on and everyone gets a little piece of it. And I can think of no more beautiful ending to a perfect love story. But tell us how we can support you and your foundation. How can we get involved? How
Oh,
can we
well,
donate?
right.
What event can we go to?
Right.
Give
Yeah.
us all the down and dirty.
But yes, how can you support us? Is www.jimmymillerfoundation.org. And, our needs are very similar to so many others. We need equipment, we need surfboard, we need help with staffing. If you are a surfer and you want to participate in an ocean therapy session, as a teacher, contact us. There's a big tab for volunteers, and it has all the specific jobs that volunteers can do. If you're a good surfer, you can be instructor. If you love the water and may not be a good surfer, you can be a water helper, turn the boards around and be in the water. We need people to help with lunches. We need people. This is a really important thing, and people don't understand that. We need people to cheer on the beach, because what we do is so visual. And when these people get up on the surfboard, when you're witnessing it, and it's called witnessing, there's a lot of other names for it. But when you're cheering for someone who just caught their first wave and you see their arms go up in the air and the smiles for miles, and you're clapping for them, honestly, that is a huge part of what.
That sounds like a great job. I would
Yeah, and
love that
it's a
job.
great job. But yes, we are sponsoring research. Coming up on October 8th is our Jimmy Family Surf Fiesta, and that's in Manhattan Beach in El Porto. And you once again can go to the website, but it's a very unusual surf contest. We have almost 200 surfers of all different ages and abilities, and you're put on a team, a 5-person team. So someone might not know how to surf, and you might get a pro surfer like our friend Alex Gray on your team. And it's a team event. You go out and the judges judge best wave, team wave. And it's just a blast. And then there's usually about 300, 400 people on the beach. And we serve, lunch and breakfast and lunch. And there's a big raffle and prizes from local sponsors. So we'd love you to come, anyone can come out to that. That's free. It's at the beach. It's free. It's fun. It's very unusual in that it's not competitive. You get something for the best wipeout, and you also get a prize for the best beach lounger, which means you decorate your beach chair. And
no, that I can do. I can do that.
So there's something for everyone. So we have usually about 4 big events, good size events a year. We recently had a poker on the beach in Santa Monica, and for the foundation, and that was exactly what it was, at a friend's house on the beach in Santa Monica. And that was a little unusual for us. We also have done a combination surf and volleyball tournament, the Surf and Turf. So it's a matter of looking on the website for our various events. But in terms of funding, our funds come from personal grants, corporate grants, so many personal grants, but corporate grants. We've been lucky enough to get funding, governmental funding, and over the years. But the majority comes from sources in California and around the country. There are so many people that we are reaching out to and teaching them about what ocean therapy is, and it's not confined to the West Coast for sure.
Well, I hope people listening all across the country, whether you live on the water or you don't, get inspired by Jimmy's incredible legacy, by your amazing work, by the soldiers and the children and the disabled and all the people that you're healing with this, and think about getting involved, donating, supporting you, spreading the word, following you on social media, all of those great things, because your work is really beautiful. So thank you, Nancy, so much for sharing your incredible love story with us. It's really been a privilege.
Thank you for having me. It meant a lot.
It meant a lot to me too. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Charity Matters podcast. I so enjoyed talking to our guest, Nancy Miller, about what it takes to start a business that truly changes people's lives. I think Nancy's comment about having faith in the process was so inspiring and true. To learn more about modern day heroes like Nancy, or if you want to reach out to us, visit charity-matters.com or connect with us on Instagram at Charity Matters. If you enjoyed our conversation, we would love it if you shared this with your family and friends. And please don't forget to leave us a review and subscribe. Remember, together we can make a difference, one small act of kindness at a time. Charity matters.